Welcome to The Intentional Exit, a leadership legacy podcast for those who don't just want to retire, but want to do it well. I'm Rebecca Schriver, and this is where we help you protect what you've built, reduce unnecessary taxes, and create a plan that gives you clarity, confidence, and control. So together, we make sure your exit is not accidental, it's intentional. Before we begin, please note that the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as tax, legal, or financial advice. For guidance specific to your situation, we recommend consulting with a qualified professional. Retire, retirement. Very similar words with very different meaning. So a lot of people prepare to retire the way they prepare for a wedding, whenever the marriage is actually the goal as well as retirement. And so when we're looking at episode 9 today, we're going to talk about why preparing to retire is different than planning for retirement. This is The Intentional Exit. I'm Rebecca Schriver. I'm your host. So let's get into it. So as people move into this thing called retirement, a lot of times they're picturing the day, right? They're looking at that day that they put in that 2 weeks notice, the day that they walk into their boss's office and say, I'm done, I've had it, I'm out of here, right? Whatever that looks like. And so as we're working in the intentional exit, it's more than just a day, right? We're actually most of the time planning for decades of what might show up. And so as you can imagine, this deserves intention, right? As the Intentional Exit Nation, we're going to start recognizing the fact that retirement isn't just a day's event, but it is a marathon, and we need to start talking about it early. So whenever we're looking down the road, it can feel like it's really, really far away, right? It's off in the distance, maybe beyond what we can actually see. But as it starts getting closer and closer, as most things do, it speeds up on you infinitely. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves enough runway to make sure that we can get these things in place. So we've talked in other episodes about tax planning, income planning. What is this difference between having a bucket of money versus having a replacement for your paycheck? And so as we do this, we want to make sure that we are planning early, because the people who have the most success, the people who have the highest chance of success, they plan really early. They don't wait until the last minute or even after they've already retired to look up and suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I have to prepare for the future. I have to really look at how is this money going to last me? And so today, again, we're going to focus on making sure we have plenty of runway, that we're looking at the long-term goal, and that we're looking at it as a lifelong marathon versus that one day, one shot event. I often see where I sit down with people and they say, oh, I retired and I'm actually making more money in retirement than I did when I was working. And they're not talking about Social Security. We well know that Social Security is going to be a reduced value of what it is we were actually earning while we were working. And so when we're looking at this and when we're taking these things into consideration, that very much tips into this concept around taxes. And so if you're earning more in retirement, or rather if you're using more money in retirement than you were even when you were working, because now you're traveling, you want to spend time with the grandkids, you want to be able to enjoy life, then we really have to look at when is the best time to get rid of the IRS. Well, today's the day, right? We can't do anything about yesterday. We talked about that last week. We want to look at what are the strategic things that we can do as we move forward. How can we take the best advantage of the years we have in front of us to prepare for that long-term marathon? So We had the big, beautiful bill. It got passed last summer, summer of 2025, and it extended out these reduced tax brackets that are allowing us to use them in such a way that we are able to get a lot of bang for our buck. We are able to earn more money than ever before at lower tax brackets. But that promise isn't forever. And we should be using these things in systematic measures to make sure that we are rolling off and controlling as many of our retirement dollars as possible. So if you can control $1 today efficiently and $1 tomorrow or next year efficiently and $1 in 3 years efficiently, but really it's only good to do about $1 per year and not just rip off the Band-Aid because then it becomes inefficient. We need to start planning today so that we have those 3 years to be the most efficient possible. This also turns into that income planning. The best built plans take about 5 to 10 years to get put into place, to have the max benefit of what you can get to make sure that you have that income replacement or that long-term paycheck replacement. Those actually get done 5 to even 10 years in advance so that we can make absolutely certain that you have that income replacement, that you have it in the most tax efficient manner possible. And that as you move into retirement, you don't have to worry about where it's coming from, right? Like that's the biggest win. The fact that you are not going to have the emotional stress of where does my money come from? How are we going to make this work? What if I have to pull out of a down bucket? None of those things are fun, right? But we want to almost be, instead of starting to figure it out, we almost want to be in this autopilot system where we're not completely removing our hands off the controls. We're not saying, oh, we're never going to look at this again. But we want to have that path as to how we're going to actually execute this along the way. Where is that money going to come from? How are we going to make ends meet? How are we going to deal with this thing called inflation? And if we have this long runway, right? If it's down the road and we have this long runway to take advantage of, we are going to be so much further ahead. So I have several clients. I talked to one of them yesterday, actually, and they started preparing with us several years before they decided to pull the plug and go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to have that event. I'm going to have that day. I'm out. Thanks, but I'm done working. I'm going to go enjoy my life. And as they made that intentional exit, they were still a little stressed. I'm going to be honest with you. It was a little uncomfortable, but we were able to go back and lean back on this thing that we had done over a several year time period. Also during this time period, not only did we figure out income replacement, but we also made sure that if something comes along that's unexpected, where we have to have a long-term care stay, or if we need extra dollars because all of a sudden we have a health event, those things are covered. It's a married couple. If one of them has a long-term care event, the other one is going to be okay. They're not going to get kicked out of their house. They're going to be able to continue to do what they need to do. The person who has long-term care event is going to have the option to stay at home. They're going to have the option to bring in the care without drastically reducing the retirement efficiency of the other spouse. Doesn't that sound like a much better place to sit? I'm sure it does. I mean, who wants to sit around and worry about these things? And I'm sorry, but stuffing it under the mattress and forgetting about it doesn't actually get rid of the worry. If you just block it out of your mind and you don't deal with it, it's eventually going to come and bite you, right? It's eventually going to come after you. You're going to feel it. Your family's going to feel it. It's not going to be a good day. And while it still is going to be hard, if you have these things show up where there's an unexpected event, but we had a plan, right? And that plan has been in place for several years, and it's had time to grow, and it's had time to accumulate, and it's had time to do the things that it was intended to do to create the most benefit. You are going to be light years ahead of the person who didn't do anything, who is now trying to scramble, figure all of it out, and try to put those pieces in place. Because also, as time continues on, these plans that we put into place, these things that we organize, grow, right? So over time, we want these things to grow. We want them to get better. We want them to mature. We want all of the good things that come with time. So as we're looking at this, you have to think of it kind of like a fine wine, right? So yes, there are good wines out there. There's all kinds of wines. I like to drink wine. Every once in a while, I like a glass of wine. But you know that there's the aged wine, right? And that's supposed to be of higher value. And it depends on your taste. But as we're kind of moving into this, we have to think of our retirement as a fine wine. Not only does it need to age well, but it actually increases in value and body and all of these things that we need as it continues to mature and as it continues to have years to increase its value. And so again, we want this long runway. We want to be able to do things early and often to be sure that as life happens, we're making little bitty adjustments, right? So instead of hitting a crisis moment with no plan in place, we're actually just maybe slightly adjusting. Because no matter what we do, I can always tell you that life is probably going to throw you some curveballs. It throws me curveballs on a daily basis. Maybe you're not, dealing with as many as I am, but the fact that I sit in the seat that I'm in, I oftentimes get to see the different things that come along and how people have had to deal with them. What the difference has been between somebody who was really good about planning, they put things into place, they had all of these different layers to their retirement strategy, and they knew exactly what it was going to look like, all the way down to Social Security planning. So I was talking with a gentleman yesterday, and completely different guy, and he was talking about, hey, we've hit 60, we're looking at retirement, and I'm trying to figure out this Social Security thing. So I know if I wait until age 67, then, that's FRA, and I can't decide whether or not I want to reach age 67 before I start taking it. And, if I stop work now, then I've got to pay for 5 years of health insurance. And, my wife, she's a year older than me, but, she stayed at home with the kids. And how does that work? And how do we organize our finances? And what if something happens to me? What if something happens to her? All of these questions, right? And the health insurance question. And what if I want to retire early? What if I don't want to work for the rest of my life? What if I've, accumulated all this money, but I still need to take these things into consideration, right? And so as we're looking at this, it's this very complex topic, right? And if you're trying to rush all of this, right? If you're trying to learn everything, it's kind of like cramming for a test. If you're trying to cram everything in those couple months, or even right at the time of retirement, you're going to find yourself caught off guard more than you're going to find yourself comfortable. You're going to have more sleepless nights than you're going to maybe wake up with a little bit of panic and then go, oh, wait, we have a plan for this. We've been working on this for years. We've been organizing this for years. And so the point is that when we start really making sure that we're doing this early, when we're talking around all of these big topics early, we're talking about what happens if I become incapacitated. What happens if I don't? What happens if I want to travel the world? What if I retire early? What if I'm not ready to take my Social Security? What if I am? What if I'm married? What if my spouse stayed at home? What if my spouse stayed at home and then I die and we don't have time to do all of the things that we were planning to do in retirement? What if we have an illness? What if? What if? What if? And here's the deal. You don't on a daily basis deal with enough what ifs to actually deal with the whole picture. You know who does? This girl. You know why? Because I do it every single day. I sat down with a gentleman earlier this week. Brilliant, right? Extremely highly intelligent, brilliant man. And he's been looking at this tax mitigation thing, right? Like he's been trying to figure it out. He's trying to decide what to do, so on and so forth. So we got together with our tax team. I said, listen, you are running through some mental math, and I'm telling you, we already have the answers. So instead of you spending the next 2 months going out and reading everything you can find and trying to decide what's right, what's not, how do we organize it, when does it make sense, when does it not make sense, what are the things I'm missing, all of this stuff, let's talk to the expert, right? So we set him up, we met with one of our tax mitigation specialists. He sat down and he literally walked him through step by step. Listen, you're right, you want to own your money, right? That was never in question. Of course he wants to own his money. Quit partnering with the IRS. But here are the things you need to know. Here are the disadvantages of doing Roth conversions or this tax planning at this level. Here are the advantages. Here are your speed bumps. So we're going to hit about 3 speed bumps fairly quickly. Let's walk through those together. So the first speed bump looks like ABC. The second speed bump looks like 1, 2, 3. And the third speed bump looks like XYZ. Now, if it were up to me, I actually would push through all the way to XYZ, and here is why. And it's particular to his situation and what his stuff looks like, and how do we organize it, and how do we do it for him. But he has experts sitting there handing him the answers, all the things he's been looking for a couple of years. He's been doing research on, trying to figure out, and we were able to simplify it for him over about an hour time period and give him really clear, concise information based on the IRS tax code. But then there were other things that he hadn't even thought about. There were things that we needed to talk through. There were things that he really believed, 100% believed in his mind that he had organized. But you know what? He may be wrong. And so we're looking into those things and we're asking all the questions. And we do this because we want you to have the most knowledge. But if you're already retired or you're like 5 seconds away from retirement, it's going to get overwhelming quick. And so we want this long runway to put it together over time, to be able to have as much time to mature that wine so that you aren't feeling the stress, so that you have the questions that you have plus the questions we have, and you've been able to walk through it with us and you've been able to get your answers. And then all of a sudden you're going to take a deep breath in and go, I feel good. Right? Like, sure, it was a little uncomfortable for a minute and I didn't know this and I didn't know that. But if we have time for you to digest it, you're not going to feel the panic. You're not going to hit that crisis mode without certain things already being in place. And you're going to be in better control of you and your spouse's future. You're going to have a sounding board, right? That's me. I get to be your sounding board. So you're going to be able to say, hey, Rebecca, I'm running into this, or, hey, I read this article. I get those calls all the time. I read this article and I have a question. I know we did this, but what does that look like? Those kinds of things. And so you get all that, right? You get all of that when you work with us. You get the professionals, you get the analysts and the tax strategists, you get the attorneys, you get all of these people who are working in your best interest, who this is their day job. right? This is all of our day job. And we're making sure that as we're working our way through this, we're asking you all of the hard questions. We're making it digestible, right? Because that's kind of my job too, is to make it apply to your life. Because otherwise it's just a wall of numbers. And while I love that wall of numbers, it can be overwhelming. And if numbers aren't your thing, you may just want to know how it practically applies to your life. And so we're going to work with you. We're going to work with you very closely to make sure that you understand how it applies to your life. So just remember, this is not to be used as legal, tax, or financial advice. Do us a favor, like and subscribe. We'll see you next week on The Intentional Exit.